Hello dear students, welcome to the second part of curricular and pedagogical practices for making schools inclusive. In this particular section, we will be discussing about the various pedagogical practices which can be adopted by the school and the teachers in order to make a school a truly inclusive institution. Now, there are a number of strategies, generic strategies which the teachers can follow in the class in order to make the learning environment of the class truly inclusive. Some of these strategies we will be discussing in brief here. Observing students with open ears and eyes. That means teachers have to be very observant. By looking at the students, the way they are sitting, the way they are interacting, you get to know how much or how many students are there with the teacher in the class and how many of them are not. Simple practices like observing the body language of the students can go a very long way in making teacher come to conclusion about the readiness of the students and also the way in which they are following or not. Making necessary sitting arrangement. Teachers have to make the students sit in a way which is kind of democratic also, and also they have to look into take these ideas into consideration that students who have got any special needs, their sitting arrangement needs to be taken care of. Early diagnosis is important, that as they may become victims of learned helplessness. Now, this is a learned helplessness is a very common phenomenon. Even if a child is diagnosed with something, yes, say for example a child is diagnosed with say a learning disability, so what generally happens is other people try to show sympathy. Oh my god, you cannot do this, oh my god, you cannot do that. So that becomes, the child also learns this thing. Oh my god, I cannot do this, oh my god, I cannot do that, so I should not even try this. So this is basically learned helplessness, ki other people make the child feel, and this is what the concept of disability is also all about. It's a social construct. So child learns that I cannot do this. This is learned helplessness. Otherwise, if tried otherwise, they would have done that. Overcoming the belief that they cannot learn. This is something which the teachers need to understand, that all children are capable of learning, and they cannot come to this conclusion on their own that these students or some specific students are not capable of learning at all. At the same time, branding and labeling is not to be done. It is almost criminal in nature to be branding or labeling a child. Oh, that child with that ADHD child. Oh, that dyslexic child. So this is what labeling is all about. So don't go into the labels and do not brand the child. Okay, this child is dyslexic, so therefore cannot do anything. No, this is something which is not to be done. And working on minimum levels of learning. Minimum levels of learning should be worked out for each and every student in consultation with the parents, in consultation with the counselor and the special educator. And the teachers should make sure that whatever minimum levels of learning are worked out for each and every child, these should be attained at a mastery level. That means the child should be very confident in attaining those minimum levels of learning. Special attention has to be given to the gifted children also, as we already discussed in the previous session, that gifted children also require nurturance. Gifted children are children who are highly intelligent, highly creative, or who are very talented. If their talents or their intelligence or their creativeness is not given due importance, is not recognized or motivated, or their energies or their talents are not given any specific direction or exposure, they may simply fade out. So gifted children also require nurturance, and teachers cannot be treating them as their assistants. Many times it so happens, and we will be discussing these things in these subsequent strategies also, buddy system for example, where children are put in groups or pairs, and what children are trying to work with each other and try to teach one another. Now this is a very good thing, say for example peer tutoring. But if that thing is followed throughout the session, that is not good, because teachers cannot be treating the highly intelligent children as their assistants. Okay, this child, so every time that responsibility is given to this child, that is not to be done, because that is maybe good for the child who has got certain learning disabilities, but may not be very good for the child who is a gifted child. That child has his or her own needs, and those needs also have to be taken care of. Focus on life skills, which are very important. These days, CBSE and all other boards are giving a lot of importance on life skills. So when we are talking of life skills, we are talking of the intellectual skills, we are talking of social skills and emotional skills. CBSE has given a list of 10 skills under these broad categories, and all of these skills should be learnt by all the students to be successful in life. Catering to multiple intelligences. Now, Gardner has given this theory of multiple intelligence, and we as teachers especially, we need to understand that intelligence does not manifest itself only in mathematics or languages or sciences and technology. No, a child who is extremely good in sports is also highly intelligent. A child who is extremely good in, say, any of the skills like dancing or swimming or any sports activity or in music or in, say, painting, these are different spheres of intelligences, and we have to give due cognition to each of these different spheres of intelligence. Continuous motivation and counseling. Children who require motivation, all children require motivation, and many children require counseling at different points of time, and there is absolutely no problem in going to a counselor for help. There is, I mean, in these days also there is a taboo attached to going to a counselor for help. We as teachers, at least, we need to understand that it's okay to be going to a counselor for help sometimes, and this also needs to be fostered among our students. If you feel low, or if you feel that you need help in anything, or for tackling some issues in your life, going to a counselor is a good option. Strategies in the classroom which are to be followed: determine readiness, how much the children already know, and then start up from there. State and present the objectives clearly so that students also know where they are headed. There is a strategy known as presenting of advanced organizers. That means students, letting the students in or inviting the students into the instructional planning process, where students also know ki okay, we are going to do this, and this is how we will be proceeding, and this is how we are going to be assessed. So this clarity needs to be there, not only in the minds of the teacher but also in the minds of the students, so that they also know the course of action or the path which they are going to take in their educational journey. Present materials in small logical steps, practice extensively. So that is something which is good for all the students. Work on practical and learning skills, presenting the same ideas in different ways, and repeated repetitions. Many students, I mean, at times teachers feel that okay, we have spoken once, it should be good enough for all the students. It's not like that. Many students would want that the same idea should be repeated in 2 or 3 different ways, in 2 or 3 different kinds of say, in different words, so that it is taken in by them, or it is imbibed by them. Pay close attention to social relations. Simple inclusion may not guarantee that they will be accepted. Having all different types of children in your class will automatically not make them feel included or accepted. Certain measures have to be taken, proactive measures have to be taken by the teachers, so that children learn how to work with each other, children learn how to include each other. So in this direction, collaborative and cooperative learning environments, they work very well. Motivate, capture and sustain attention. Some students need to overlearn, repeat, practice more than the other children. So these are typically children with say with intellectual deficiency, or even children who are slow learners. They are, because of their IQ levels, they may require to learn, relearn certain things, because they tend to forget things very easily. Giving each student a chance to experience success, that is very important. So we need to understand that each and every child, each and every adolescent needs to feel success, experience success, and that is how he or she is able to feel good about himself or herself. And this kind of a feeling is required for everyone in order to develop a positive self-concept and a high self-esteem. So teachers have to consciously think of activities or occasions where each and every child gets to feel success. Breaking down learning into small small steps, making it more concrete and experimental. Use of visual aids is very useful generally. Immediate feedback and reinforcement. Reinforcements are very important, and also feedback is important. Children need to know, or students need to know ki whatever they are doing, how good it is, how bad it is, and then getting reinforcements actually help. Assistive technologies and computer aided instruction also goes a long way in making inclusion a reality. Small group teaching and individual instruction, planned repetitions and summarizing, opportunities for frequent practice and revision, activity based and real life experiences, student mentors and peer tutoring. These are some of the strategies we will be discussing in a short while. Having high expectations, this is very important. At times teachers tend to develop this kind of a psyche, okay, I'm not expecting much from these particular students, they are not in a position to do well, or they will not be able to do much. So having those expectations will automatically will come down in their behavior also, and they will be then manifested in the student. They will be, I mean, communicated, not very explicit terms, but yes, implicitly they will be carried on to the students also, and students may feel that okay, our teachers feel that we are not capable of doing these things. That is something which is not to be done. Counseling is taking care of emotional and psychological effects, that is, counseling is continuously required. Now we will be specifically discussing certain strategies which are very helpful for teachers in making classes truly inclusive. We will be specifically discussing in detail about collaborative and cooperative learning, peer tutoring, buddy system, reflective teaching, multisensory approach. Now, first of all, the collaborative and cooperative learning. Now, these days, lot of importance is given to the collaborative and cooperative learning, and they are basically based on the social constructivist theories. We understand that each and every learner constructs his or her own knowledge. Nobody can pour knowledge into the minds of the young learners. We do not follow the jug mug philosophy, where teacher is a jug full of knowledge and this jug full of knowledge is going to pour knowledge in the small mugs which are students. Each and every learner constructs his or her own learning. So that is why we need to provide those kinds of experiences to the learners so that they are able to construct knowledge for themselves. Student centered instruction, it is basically where we are moving from the teacher centered modes of instruction to the student centered methods of instruction, where the students are responsible for their own learning. They play the most important role in their own learning. Teachers are facilitators. They are just, you can say, they will guide them, they will motivate them, they will encourage them, they will orient them, but the students are learning on their own. Teach the students, and they learn to take on the responsibility for their learning. They learn to take on the initiative also for their learning. They learn to do many tasks on their own as a result of being a part of this collaborative and cooperative learning. Teachers are facilitators, and there are, I mean, in this kind of learning, students, they are divided into different groups, and groups are heterogeneous mix of students. That means each group is comprised of a mix of so many different types of students, and all of these students are basically working together towards a common goal. Say a task is given to them, and all the students are helping and collaborating with each other and trying to fulfill that task. Now, what is the basic philosophy behind the collaborative learning is, let the students experience the way in which tasks are done in the real world. So the same kind of situations are created in the classroom situation, where students are working in groups and they are trying to accomplish a task which is as real as possible to the real world. So they take on the responsibility of getting the task done. They decide what is to be done, when it is to be done, who is going to do what. So all of this onus is on the students, and they learn as a result of being a part of this educative experience. Generally, it has been seen that if there is a teacher controlled instruction, that is, the teacher is teaching and the students are just listening and listening, that does not make the students learn things in a very, you can say, good manner, at a very high level. At the most, researchers have proven that students will go only up to, say, in the Bloom's taxonomy knowledge, at the most understanding. They seldom go beyond that, majority of the students. But when we are talking of these collaborative learning, students will be in a position to learn analyze, come together, evaluate and synthesize. So learning happens at a much higher level. That is when we are talking of the higher order thinking skills. Besides academic, students also grow on social and emotional skills. So this is also a very important aspect, that when as education we are talking of all-round development of personality of a person, we are not just talking of the academics, we are talking of social skills, emotional skills, moral skills, aesthetics. So all these other dimensions are taken care of in the groups, in these group activities. So when students are working together in groups, I say I'm a part of the group. I may not like what the other person is saying, but I know that I cannot react in a very different manner, or I cannot react violently. I cannot. So I need to learn certain skills like negotiation, discussion, in order to put forward my point of view. I need to be assertive to put forward my point of view. So these situations or these activities actually help in learning life skills, and these actually inculcate a lot of other things in the students which are much beyond academics. Various kinds of real work like situations and work are given, like projects, presentations, problem solving, discussions, etc., and students learn and grow as a result of being a part of them. It promotes supportive socialization. It greatly enhances academic performance at a much higher level, not just at the lower levels of learning, at higher levels of learning. It has a very positive impact on self-concept, because students learn that we have done this. They have, in the entire process of collecting information, presenting, doing a lot of work on their own, they gain self-confidence. They come to think that, okay, we have done this, a sense of achievement and accomplishment is there. They also learn to take on the responsibility of their learning and also the other people's learning. Teaching others is also, at times they will be teaching also to others. If somebody has got a grasp over a particular topic, he or she may take on the responsibility of making others also learn. Development of social and emotional skills, development of higher faculties of cognition, as we have already discussed. Positive impact on children without disabilities and also with disabilities. It has a very good impact generally on all different types of children, and this is what, but yes, there are certain precautions which need to be taken. I mean, collaborative activities are not something which is a quick fix solution for everything. We have to be designing collaborative activities with a lot of caution. Heterogeneous grouping should be there. That means, should we be making all children of similar abilities together, or it should be heterogeneous grouping? Say for example, in a class of 40 students, if we are making groups of students, should it be like all the A graders should be put separately together, B graders together, C graders together likewise, or should we always have a mix of students? In each group there is one A grade, one B grade, one C grade, one D grade, one E grade. That kind of a thing should be there. So each of these groupings have got pros and cons of their own. Ability grouping has at times its pros also, its cons also. So if we put all the A graders together, they will automatically tend to feel, okay, yes, we are superior lot, our work has to be the best, and generally it comes out to be best. And yes, the B graders, C graders and the F graders will feel, okay, we are good for nothing, we already don't know anything, let the A graders do their job. So what is it that they are actually learning? And if at every point of time, if we do the heterogeneous grouping, so generally what may happen is, in each group, if there is one A grader, one B, one C, one D, one E, generally the A grader or B graders may tend to take on, okay, yes, and because they may feel the teacher is expecting us to take on the lead and help the others to do their task, and there may be some students who may take a very backseat, let others do the work. So these are certain things which teachers need to think about well in advance and then organize and plan for things. So heterogeneous grouping has got its own cons, ability grouping has got its own cons. So it's always a mix of things. It has, at some times you can have the ability grouping, at some times you can have heterogeneous grouping. Say for example, a challenging task is there. So when we are talking of nurturing the gifted children, so if we put, at times when we put all the gifted children together, it gives them that, you can say, intellectual stimulus to come out to their, you know, capabilities, the real capabilities, and come out with something which may be truly outstanding. So these are things which we need to consider. We cannot or do not simply follow one rule. We have to keep on experimenting and trying out different permutations and combinations. We have to keep in mind the needs and requirements of children with special needs, and also the requirements of gifted learners. They are not going to be treated only as teacher assistants. Assessments of processes and as well as products of learning needs to be there. So in another, you must have studied about assessments of learning, where we are not just talking of the final products of learning, the processes of learning, that is how whatever task is given to them, how that task has been accomplished. So teachers can do that with the help of preparing rubrics which can be made, which can be specifically focused on the processes of learning as well as on the products of learning. This is something which is very important, and yes, we need to understand that processes of learning are more important than the final products of learning. Now we come to the second strategy, that is the scaffolding. Scaffolding is a support given to the student by a teacher throughout the learning process. This support is specifically tailored to each and every. So teachers are the facilitators, they are supporting and facilitating the child or children as far as their special needs go. And when the students start following or doing things, they gradually they remove this, or they start taking a back seat. This is also known as fading. So teacher is a facilitator who empowers the learner and then withdraws, making him or her an independent learner. This is known as scaffolding. Teachers are there throughout, but yes, at what stage, what kind of a support and facilitation is to be given, that the teachers decide based on the empowerment level of learners. Now this is given by Wikipedia and opencolleges.edu. So these resources are mentioned here. Then we have the next strategy, which is known as peer tutoring, a very common and a very nice strategy, where it's a flexible peer mediated strategy that involves students serving as academic tutors and tutees. So they, at times they take on the roles as their student A and student B is there, they are peer tutors. So A is teaching B in some subjects or topics, B is teaching A in some other things. At some other places, we may have a child with special needs paired to another child, so that child is taking care of the child with special needs, is trying to help and facilitate the child. So it can be done in number of ways. There are number of forms also. Instructional peer tutoring is high ability with low ability student. So but yes, the teachers need to understand that depending upon the needs of the children with special needs, should we be having same peer tutor throughout or different peer tutors, depending upon, say for example, an autistic child may not be comfortable with so many different peers at the same time. So these things have to be considered. At the same time, the teachers also need to understand that the parents of, say, the child who is helping the children with special needs may not be very comfortable. Okay, my child is doing this, so he or she is wasting his or her time. So based on all the dynamics, these decisions need to be taken. Monitorial peer tutoring, that means monitor is taking care of a group of 3 to 4 students, and peer tutoring is, it's reciprocal. The tutor and the tutee, they kind of switch roles. There can be different modalities of peer tutoring. Then we have another system very beneficial, that is the buddy system, and it is a very nice system where 2 students are put together so that they are able to help out each other and monitor each other. So 2 students, they are kind of buddies and they are going together everywhere, they are helping out each other in everything. So it allows them to learn values like respect, responsibility, empathy, friendship, compassion, etc. It enables them to feel safe, respected, valued. There are less chances of being a bully or being bullied. It builds self-confidence, it builds leadership skills, it inculcates life skills, improves academic outcomes as well. So it can, if it is carried out nicely and properly, it can be very beneficial for all the children. Then we come to the multisensory approach. As we have already discussed, that we learn, or there are different kinds of learners. There are some visual learners, there are some auditory learners, or there are some tactile learners. So keeping in mind the learning you can say learning patterns of different people, we should be following a multi-sensory approach which is beneficial for all students irrespective of their abilities. So, it is multi-sensory approach is involving more than one senses during instruction in order to make learning more effective and motivating. Senses involved may be a combination of visuals, auditory, tactile and kinesthetic. So, we may have anime, presentations, pictures, teacher's voice, recorded voice, podcast, real objects, specimen, different textures, sandpapers, or moving in different ways, shapes, etc., in order to facilitate learning for our students. Now, when we are talking of assessments, we are talking of differential assessments, differential assignments, differential assessments, then we are talking moving from norm reference to criterion reference. It is not a good idea to be comparing one child to the other child. So, in the classes at school level, we should not be having norm reference, we should be having criterion referenced or ipsative assessment, that is self reference kind of assessments. Minimum levels of learning should be there, diagnostics should be there, focus on analysis of errors. Now, this is important. So, whatever test papers are given or the way in which any kind of assessment is done, the teachers need to see what different kinds of errors are being done by students, and analysis of errors need to be done so that the teacher is in a better position to find out why these errors are happening, where are the gaps in the learning, and therefore remedial action can be taken on the basis of that. Focus on reflective diaries, that is very important for if children are taught how to write their reflective diaries or reflective logs, it can give the teachers a lot of insight into the way their brains are working, the way they are approaching a problem, the way what kind of mistakes they are committing or not committing, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and in this process what actions need to be taken. So, it is very good, and also it is very good from the students point of view. They come to understand their own self, they come to understand their own learning, and it is considered to be very good for inculcating of their metacognitive skills. Multiple and adaptive modes of assessments, that means we cannot confine ourselves restricting to only one type of you can say one mode of assessment. We have to have various methods of assessments, we have to have various techniques as well as tools of assessments, so that we are able to do a comprehensive and continuous kind of assessments done. This is also known as the constructivist methods of assessments. Last, we come to the reflective teaching. As we all know, teachers have to be reflective practitioners. We need to keep on reflecting and introspecting what things are going on in the class, how the students are responding and reacting, and then coming to or doing things according to that. Now, we come to the role of administrators. There are a number of things which administrators should consider. What is the roadmap, school infrastructure, admission policies, counseling, resource room, ability grouping, should it be done, should it not done, how do we do the differentiated curriculum instruction and assessments, that is the individualized educational plans, provision of vocational subjects, what subjects should be provided, the NIOS, that is National Institute of Open Schooling, should it be there, life skills. So, these are different points which the administrators they should look into. Now, in the last we come to the collaboration. There is, in order to make inclusion a reality, there has to be a collaboration between all of these different persons, the teachers, the regular teachers as well as the special teachers, the counselors, school administration, parents, parent-teacher associations, and specialized personnel such as a speech therapist or a physiotherapist or a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist. So, all of these people coming together and collaborating will make inclusion a reality for all the schools. Basically, the key to being a good inclusive school is open communication and clarity, which is very important. With this, we come to the end of this particular unit on inclusive schools. Now, you can check your progress, the questions are there, and I would want that all of you should be focusing on these questions and try to answer these questions in your own ways. Thank you so much, and I wish you a very happy day. Thank you.